a little bit of Ryan Poles Day today that we wanted to make sure that we covered. Obviously, with Matt Eberflus gone, the hot seat is even hotter for our good friend Ryan Poles. Adam Johns first reported today, Hogan Johns, I believe it was, that the Bears signed Matt Eberflus to a 5-year deal initially and Ryan Poles to a 4-year deal. Fellas, first of all, thoughts on the 5-year deal for Flus and the 4-year deal for the GM, and then after that, do you feel that an extension is incoming? Do we feel like he's deserved? Should he be extended if he's kept around? I want to get some overall thoughts. Frank, let's start with you.
The 4-year, 5-year thing, I've never heard of anything like that in my life. That's strange. Usually you just line them up. That way, even if you let them go, it's like the dead money. I don't know if they call it dead money, but because it doesn't go against the cap, but like it all just lines up, right? It's supposed to make sense. But of course, this is the Chicago Bears. So nothing ever makes sense. In terms of extending him, obviously that has to be on the table, but whatever decision has to be made, I don't know if I have an opinion one way or the other, because I am sort of turning a leaf in accepting that maybe Ryan Poles isn't as good as we gave him credit for with a lot of these things, and that's kind of why the grand proclamation is a little bit later, I think is going to be pretty necessary. But Kevin Warren has to make the decision right now, because if you're going to let the guy pick a head coach, you can't just fire him after a year. That's just going to be another whole turnstile, do-si-do, or doing this whole rigmarole again. It can't happen. Either you have faith in the guy to give him another 3-4 year window with a new head coach to see how he builds with him and how things go, or you have no faith at all, even an inkling of a doubt that he's going to get it wrong. You got to get rid of him and get your guy. It just is what it is. Naz, what do you think?
I think he's got to go. We need cohesion. And at least if he is gone, then we can maybe take the approach of hiring the coach first and then bringing in a complimentary GM, because it's pretty clear Kevin Warren has taken the reins of the organization. Whatever GM we bring in is not going to be the top guy in any way. He's not going to be a culture setter, and he's not going to be running the team from afar. Kevin Warren has clearly made his presence known. So I would rather there be more continuity and bring in a coach and a GM that are on the same page at the same time. But I want to hire the coach first, kind of like what the Niners did with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. So that's what I think. It is really weird. Like 10 months ago, we weren't feeling this way. We're like, oh, Poles is in his bag. And, we're like, oh, yeah, I'm kind of concerned this, kind of concerned, but nah, like we got Rome, like, let's go. And different vibes these days.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, tell any Bears fan coming off that end of last season that this is where we'd be at a year later. It's just nobody would have believed you. The 5-year, did they like overpay for Flus? Like, did he have like another offer or something? Like it just doesn't make sense. Because normally I feel like the norm is 4 years. I feel like that's kind of the norm. But then we heard, obviously, that Eberflus had that 5th year, and so maybe that's why they leaned even more towards bringing him back this year. But then to find out that Ryan Poles had a year less than him, like, what if something had happened? Would Eberflus have been kept, and then they let Ryan Poles? Like, that's just, it's so Bears. It's just so Bears. I think that's the best way to phrase it. The other little piece of the other little nugget news for Ryan Poles is Sylvie of Waddle and Sylvie reported that Ryan Poles is reportedly probably from Mr. Bajent again. He's frustrated with having to report to Kevin Warren, and that he actually might not have taken this job if he knew what the dynamic would really be like. He apparently really enjoyed reporting directly to George and ownership. I think that makes a ton of sense. Guy gets hired above him. He now has a new boss who maybe he doesn't see eye to eye with, didn't know what that would be like in the interview process. Thoughts on this report that Ryan Poles, and again, it's not confirmed or anything. We have to be a little tenuous about where the source is coming from with everybody wants Tyson Bagent to be starting. But if this is true, Are you shocked? Are you good with Ryan Poles moving on? Like, what is sort of the way forward from here?
I mean, make no mistake, whether this is true or not, like him feeling it, your boy got cucked out. I mean, it is what it is. Like, he's not the football guy anymore. Nas was just talking about that. And every time that more gets unveiled, every time a layer of the onion gets peeled back, what Nas first said after that press conference just remains, it's aging like fine wine. That needs to be put in a museum somewhere, because he called this. He looked at sort of the dynamics. He looked at the way it looked and sort of the adult in the room. Everything he said there is just continuing to come to light. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that he is frustrated with it, but then like, I just keep going back to Nas's point of like, that was probably needed. Whether he stays or not, someone above him was needed for the time being until he matures into this role. And if that means this just wasn't for you and you have to go elsewhere and be a GM some years down the road, and you know, this is sort of on your resume, it is what it is. I mean, that's how I'm feeling right now.
This feels like some PR work done from the Poles camp to maybe save some face, because I don't think this gets.
I was always planning on getting fired. I was never planning on being around forever.
I don't think this gets like leaked in any way, unless you're like trying to make it seem like, oh well, I didn't really want to be here anymore, kind of thing. You know, it's hard to get another run as a GM. You need to have like a lot of success to get a second stint somewhere else. And since Poles hasn't really been here long enough to like establish a good amount of success, this might be like what his agent told him to do, so he could maybe like keep some credibility going his way. I don't know. It's not great.
He is young enough. You know, I know we've talked about that a number of times, especially these last couple of weeks. He is young enough where I do believe if he were to move on, he would definitely get another chance at some point to be a GM. It just doesn't seem like this is something he's going to want to build through, and maybe that relationship with Kevin Warren just isn't as super positive as they made us believe. And again, you just go back, like Frank, you were mentioning, every time a layer gets peeled from this shitball of an onion, you just start thinking like, okay, now things kind of make a little bit more sense, just with like the weird answers that the weird non-answers, I should say, that Kevin Warren was giving about who had the final say, and the demeanor that Kevin Warren had versus Ryan Poles, who kind of looked just like he would rather be anywhere else, which you could read into it a million different ways, but you kind of start putting those puzzle pieces together to get a bigger picture. Things are not good in Halas Hall right now. And I know we weren't going to touch on the game too much, but you get all this positivity coming out. Oh, the week of practice was so amazing. We did such a great job with the details. Everything looked so good. And then the team just doesn't show up and gets blown out in a primetime game. And so I think it's just really kind of setting in what this culture that was so important to Ryan Poles, it's just not there right now. The 4 big quotes that he had. Our philosophy will be building this team through the trenches. Did he do that, Frank and Nas?
I'm not even close. It was literally the total opposite.
He said, we will focus on building a winning culture. Would you guys, either of you, say that that's there?
They haven't won.
He believes in Matt Eberflus. He's the right coach for the team. Nope.
He was not.
And the final one that is getting run in his face right now, we will take the North and never give it back. By the way, this is their, third straight 4th place finish?
Yes.
Yikes.
Great. Just really, really great. And they got a Monday night football game on the road in Minneapolis coming up here. So,
God. Can I just say too, though, but my overarching thought.
That sigh is every Bears fan knows.
Yeah. My overarching thought, though, is these were the worries, not necessarily from us. We were just sort of letting things play out. I don't think we ever delved too much into it, but these were the worries from people who were pretty upset at the way that this all shaped out in terms of hiring backwards, getting the coach, the GM, and then the president of football operations, or whatever his official title is, to be the football guy. It all just happened out of order. Now, the coach and GM, to Naz's point earlier, like you can do that one of two ways. I'm always okay with, however, as long as it winds up working with the football guy being the last one. He didn't pick any of these fucking guys. He has no ties to any of it. So anything that you have potentially built, even if it's positive, it's probably just for the next guy anyway. Like, so that's what a lot of people's worries were. And unfortunately, it's just all coming to fruition.
Last question I have for the poll stuff, and then we'll get to our grand proclamations. Is there a scenario? I know both of you kind of are kind of said where you're leaning. How comfortable, on a scale of, let's say, 1 to 10, how comfortable would you feel if Ryan Poles was retained and given an extension and was allowed to supposedly hire his next, his second head coach? Oh man, that silence is not good. That's not good.
I want to hear what Naz has to say first.
I'm okay with it right now because I know he's not the only one making the decision. Because I actually don't trust him right now.
Yeah.
So if he's retained, I'm not gonna be pissed off about it. If he's part of this decision, seeing those that preliminary 4 coach target tweet that we discussed offline earlier, that's encouraging if those are really the 4 targets, because I think those are all good candidates. I like this coaching pool. I'd like to say it's dummy proof, but I just said that last offseason. So yeah, I'm feeling fine. I feel fine. I'm numb right now. God damn it.
Those 4 head coaches that Nas was referring to was a tweet by Dan McNeil, which just, please don't be accurate. Like I don't need Dan McNeil being relevant in 2024 and beyond. The coaches he mentioned, sources confirm that these 4 names are being looked at by the Bears: Ben Johnson, Brian Flores, Joe Brady, and Mike Vrabel. All 4 we have talked about a few times on this podcast. Frank, continue.
Yeah, I mean, I feel where Nas is coming from. I have sort of conflicting thoughts. I still don't think he's done an awful job gathering player talent, but forget the roster itself. Like if sort of what Nas is saying, if Kevin Warren sort of has a different role with the culture and the coach picking and things, and they sort of figured out their avenues that way, I'd probably be a little more comfortable. We'll never know what those roles actually are. So I would choose to believe that that's going to happen to be comfortable with it. But then I just think about, I mean, dude, we've never really even taken a deep dive into all the assistant coaches and the weird culture shit that's happened. 2 people got dismissed last year and we still really don't know why. All Ryan Poles said was the behavior was unacceptable. So were you hitting on some of the female coaches? Were you and we know NFL, or really any professional team's coaches can say some pretty wild shit to try to amp their guys up. But were you saying something so over the line to some of these guys? We have no idea. So all we can do is speculate. Point being, he has been awful at assembling a coaching staff. Truly, truly awful. So even if he were to hit on a lot of these pieces, and we like the Jalen stuff, Tyreek still has a chance to get things turned around. There are players where you can say, you know what, maybe he's drafted well and signed some guys well. Obviously, we know the bad stuff too. But even if he knocked it out of the ballpark on the player side, he just completely cut his feet from under him because of all this coaching stuff. It's been since last year. Alan Williams was dismissed. I forget who the other, I think it was a defensive staff, the DB's coach, I believe. And then obviously this year with the wrong hire with Waldron, it's just, he's never made a good, and Eberflus in general, but he's never made a good decision on that, on that side of things. So it's tough. I have conflicting thoughts, and I just, I don't know. Like Nas said, I'm numb.
If he, it is tough. People saying that he's the worst GM in Bears history. Go read a fucking book.
Phil Emery existed, and that wasn't that long. How young are you? That's ridiculous.
Learn some history about the Bears. He's definitely not the worst GM, but he hasn't done anything to really solidify himself in a position that he should be given the keys and just trusted to draft the correct way, find the best players. There's a ton of players he's missed, and again, that happens. But the offensive line thing, the defensive line thing, he just didn't do enough with it. And, Bears fans and media and everybody was just screaming from the mountaintops, you have to improve this. And he just decided not to. And it's not for lack of trying. He did invest certain resources, just not ideally, I think the way that most people would expect you to.